The 9th generation of video game consoles kicked off in November of 2020 with a pretty, well, mixed reception. The problems aren't with the consoles themselves, no. The PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series systems are huge leaps forward in terms of raw power and speed. No, the main issue here was the games, or rather the lack of games. I'm specifically talking about exclusives here. There weren't really any games that felt like they couldn't have been made on last-gen hardware. I mean, on Xbox, most of their games can be played on PC, even on smartphones now through xCloud. And what was supposed to be their big launch title, Halo Infinite, got delayed to holiday 2021. On the PS5, the console that I personally opted for, I had a lot of fun with Spider-Man Miles Morales and Demon's Souls. They were amazing games to get with my new console and looked incredible. But I mean, one of those was also available on PS4, and the other was a remake of a PS3 game. A fantastic remake, but a remake nonetheless. All of this is to say that the lack of next-gen exclusives coupled with the issues with shortages that persist to this day, it didn't really feel like the next generation had actually started. Until now. Since the game was first revealed, developer Insomniac Games claimed that Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart was going to take full advantage of the PS5 hardware, from its beefed up CPU and GPU to its fancy new SSD. And the trailers focused a lot on that SSD part, showing Ratchet & Clank transitioning from one environment to another in the blink of an eye. Top that with stunning visuals and confirmation of ray tracing support, it seemed like this was going to be the first true next-gen experience on the PS5. The game has been out for a while now, and I've played and beaten it, and I can confirm that, yes, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is not only a great showcase for the PS5 and a taste of what we can expect from games on these new systems in the years to come, but it's also a great game on its own that I enjoyed my time with from beginning to end. Rift Apart is now the 17th game in the long-running Ratchet & Clank series, and it's also the first and only one at this point that I've actually played. I've heard great things about the series before, I've just never gotten around to playing any of them. And speaking as a newcomer to this franchise without any prior knowledge of the characters and the story, I'm happy to say that Rift Apart is a great starting point in case you're interested. The game begins with Ratchet & Clank attending a festival in their honor. Ratchet is currently the last of the Lombax race and was separated from his family some time ago. As a present to Ratchet, Clank reveals that he has fixed the Dimensionator, a device that can be used to travel through dimensions so that Ratchet can look for his missing family. Yeah, Ratchet is apparently from another dimension. Kind of reminds me of Silver and Blaze from the Sonic series, who are also from different dimensions. Or was it from the future? Never mind, fuck you Sonic 06. The festival is cut short when Ratchet & Clank's arch-nemesis Dr. Nefarious suddenly shows up, and steals the Dimensionator for himself, unleashing utter dimensional hell. Ratchet and Clank are separated in the chaos, and they alongside Dr. Nefarious are transported to an alternate dimension where Nefarious is a tyrannical emperor. Clank is lost and missing an arm, but is thankfully saved by another Lombax. This is Rivet, Ratchet's dimensional counterpart, and decides to take Clank with her. Meanwhile, Ratchet begins to search for Clank in Nefarious City, and not only sees the other Lombax taking off with Clank to another planet, but also discovers that Dr. Nefarious has assumed control of Emperor Nefarious' entire operation. With the help of Phantom, Ratchet escapes Nefarious City to search for Clank. Elsewhere, Rivet has taken Clank to her home planet. After digging through Clank's memory files and confirming that he came from another dimension along with another Lombax, Rivet and Clank get in contact with Ratchet and decide to work together to rebuild the Dimensionator. Not only so that Ratchet and Clank can return home, but to save the multiverse as a whole. Ratchet eventually meets up with another robot named Kit, who isn't too comfortable with being partners at first. She was originally built by Emperor Nefarious to do his bidding until she one day snapped out of her programming and escaped, but still fears that she'll turn to her dangerous ways at any moment. Ratchet, being the optimistic guy that he is, assures her that she'll make a great partner, convincing Kit to join him and Rivet and Clank on their mission. This example of self-doubt and distancing yourself from those around you to keep them safe is one of the many mature themes that are prevalent throughout Rift Apart. Despite the game having a cheerful and comedic exterior, Rift Apart doesn't shy away from tackling some serious subjects and having a quiet moment every now and then. Rivet, for example, has a similar desire of being a lone wolf, and is hardened from the years of battling Emperor Nefarious. She and Kit slowly warm up to the idea of having a companion, a dream that comes crashing down when it's revealed that Kit was the robot that made Rivet lose her arm. The scene in which Rivet discovers this is a dramatic highlight in the story for me, and it's honestly pretty heartbreaking. Of course, cutscenes such as these are helped by the great performances of the cast. Everyone in this game does a great job conveying both the serious and funny moments. Because yeah, it's a cartoon, and a well written one at that.
Holy. You said it, pal!
There's plenty of jokes combined with visual humor that keeps the player engaged for the whole ride. Rift Apart has a great story with great moments in between, and I was pleasantly surprised. I'm sure there were several things that went over my head as someone who's never played the previous games, but I still enjoyed pretty much every second of the narrative. And I won't spoil the epic last act since the game is still relatively new and I'd rather you experience it for yourself. Because as I mentioned at the beginning of the video, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart is a great game. While I like the story a lot, the gameplay is what mainly kept me coming back. Think of the gameplay as a combination of platforming and third-person shooting. You eventually get a wide variety of weapons to play around with that range from your basic blaster to a shotgun with a wide spread, to a goddamn death laser that shreds through most of your opposition. They can all be leveled up the more you use them, which makes them more powerful and unlocks more perks that you can purchase from the shop using Raritanium to make them even more effective. Shooting at bad guys just feels really good, helped in large part by the sound design, impact, and the controller. The adaptive triggers of the PS5's DualSense takes the gunplay to another level, with different levels of resistance being applied depending on the current weapon you have equipped. And each weapon also has a different sound that plays when you switch to it that comes out of the controller's speakers. But to try out these weapons, you gotta purchase them with bolts that can be collected by defeating enemies or breaking the various boxes you find by exploring the levels you travel through. The worlds in Rift Apart are all fun to play in. They each have a distinct look and gimmick that keeps them from feeling too samey. Sargasso, for example, lets you traverse the swamps and soar through the sky. Savali is this huge environment that you can just blaze across with the hover boots. They let you zoom across the ground incredibly fast and with good timing and intuition can help you create some shortcuts or provide an alternate way of collecting those shiny gold bolts. When you're not progressing the story, you can go after various collectibles scattered across each of the levels, ranging from the aforementioned gold bolts to new armor sets, Raritanium, spy bots, Lorbs, Krager bears, and of course, bolts. Lots and lots of bolts. These are all optional but are fun to go after because Ratchet and Rivet themselves are fun to control and these levels are fun to navigate. I already talked about the hover boots that provide a fast means of transportation, but both Lombaxes also have a very versatile glove. It allows you to do a phantom dash which acts as a dodge as well as a means to phase through certain barriers. You can perform a wall run to cross larger gaps, use the glove as a makeshift grapple hook to swing across pits or just launch yourself across a huge chunk of the planet. And of course, there's the Rift Tether, allowing you to not only rift towards various portals to escape enemy fire or access different areas, but also to open up hidden pocket dimensions to nab those shiny new pieces of armor. The title Rift Apart isn't just a hint at the story's premise. Dimensional rifts are everywhere in this game, and it's this gameplay mechanic that turns a relatively standard third-person action-adventure game into an exciting intergalactic trip seamlessly delivered thanks to the power of next-gen hardware. The PS5 superfast SSD allowed the developers to go crazy with these rifts, with next to no hitches and zero loading. 1 minute you're fighting a boss on one planet only to be suddenly transported to another in the middle of the battle before you can even say holy. Rift Apart is just so fast and frenetic. The whole game is like that action set piece from chapter 11 of Uncharted 4 on crack. Now that I think about it, Rift Apart is a lot like Uncharted, only without the super linear on-rails level design and set in outer space and set pieces that wouldn't be out of place in a Star Wars movie. It's also apparently like a Resident Evil game in one section, where you have to run away from this unstoppable monster, very similar to the tyrants in the RE games. You're being rifted from one dimension to another, being launched at breakneck speeds, engaging in intense and chaotic gunfights against so many different types of enemies, and all of this, by the way, runs at 60 FPS. And not just 60 FPS, but 60 FPS with ray tracing. This game's presentation is a technical accomplishment on so many levels. The character models, reflections, facial expressions, and near non-existent loading times pushes this game to next-gen status. Though of course it's not all perfect, no game really is. Every now and then there is a stutter or two when you're rifting, though it's honestly not that big of a deal. It was a lot more noticeable during the reveal trailer. The only time that I saw frame rate drops that were actually noticeable was during the final boss. And although I don't want to show it, there's a lot of things going on at once during that section, so it's understandable and didn't last long at all. The game shows a bit of jank every now and then, like when I was trying to launch off this ramp and for some reason it just wouldn't work. I was able to launch off of all the other ramps just fine, but for some reason this one gave me a lot of trouble. The camera can get a little wonky in some areas, but really at this point, what action game doesn't have its share of camera issues? As for the rest of the game, the map isn't as easy to follow as I'd like, specifically in vertical levels. Also, I could have done without the dimensional anomaly and glitch sections. These should have been strictly optional, not sections that have to be completed to progress the story. When everything else moves so quickly, these moments just shit on the pace. Thankfully, I think there's an option to skip them, but that's not exactly the best solution in my mind. Just make them part of the optional collectible hunting. It's the same problem as the puzzles and MJ and Miles sections of Marvel's Spider-Man, which was also developed by Insomniac, so I guess they're just being consistent. But really, in the grand scheme of things, these little annoyances are just that, little. They aren't nearly enough to bring down what I believe to be one of the best third-person shooter/action platformers I have ever played. It's got an enjoyable story, great characters, fun gameplay, lots of side content and replay value. Like, I didn't even mention challenge mode, which you unlock after beating a game. Effectively, it's a new game plus where you keep your weapons, upgrades, and most collectibles. I've played a tiny bit of it and it seems like you can level up your weapons even further. There may even be brand new ones that weren't available during my first playthrough. I know I'm going to have a blast revisiting all of these levels to look for everything and replay those amazing adrenaline-filled action movie moments. But even without all the extra stuff, Rift Apart's main campaign took me about 12 hours to complete while doing some light exploration. And to me, even that was well worth the price of admission. If you have a PS5 and can comfortably afford it, buy this game. Take it from me, a Ratchet & Clank newbie turned Ratchet & Clank fan. I'll be back soon to talk about a certain intergalactic bounty hunter. Until then, be safe, and thank you for watching.